Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Sustaining Sustainability. I'm your host, CB Bhattacharya, Professor and Director of the Center for Sustainable Business at the University of Pittsburgh. This week, I'm delighted to say that I'm joined from New York City by Peter Land, Senior Vice President and Chief Communications and Sustainability Officer for Dick's Sporting Goods, the largest athletics and fitness retailer in the United States. Prior to joining Dick's Sporting Goods, Peter served as a partner at Finsbury, a consulting firm specializing in corporate reputation, crisis management, and capital markets. He has also held senior communication roles at AOL and Pepsi Co. Peter, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
It's a pleasure. So, Peter, before we dive into the big questions, could you begin by telling us about the why behind your own professional journey to become the Chief Communications and Sustainability Officer of Dick's Sporting Goods? How would you define your personal purpose?
I'm very, very fortunate to be working at Dick's Sporting Goods. I've been at the company for a little over a year and a half. And prior to that, I worked at a consulting firm, Finsbury, and Dick's Sporting Goods was a client of ours. So we started working for Dick's right prior to the decision that we had made about our firearms policy. So I would say it was winter of 2018. And through that work around firearms and some of the other kind of major initiatives that the company was going through, I had an opportunity to spend a lot of time with their senior leadership team and get to know the company. So then over the course of the next several years, we continued to work very closely together. And then during COVID, as you can imagine, there was kind of frequent communication in terms of advising senior management on employee communications and external communications. So kind of during that whole initial phase of the COVID crisis, that's when we kind of evolved the relationship, I guess you can say. And I went from being kind of an outside consultant for the company to coming inside, running sustainability communications and government affairs.
Wonderful. So, continuing the focus on purpose, what today is the purpose of Dick's Sporting Goods, and how has that purpose changed over time, if at all? And how does that purpose guide the work you decide not to do and what you decide to do?
It's a great question. I would say that our purpose hasn't really changed in a significant way since Dick Stack opened the very first Dick's Sporting Goods in 1948. I think he believed, and then Ed Stack, who is his son, who took over the company and really was responsible for building it to where it is today. They have a fairly simple, and we as a company have a fairly simple belief that sports makes people better, right? That through exercise, through the outdoors, through being part of a community, learning how to win and lose gracefully in sports, that in general, sports makes people better. And that's kind of been our guiding philosophy at the company really since its inception. And the purpose part of that really comes down to, I would say, is most clear in our Sports Matter initiative, where it is totally designed to provide resources for young people that potentially don't have resources to play sports, whether it's equipment or reseeding baseball fields or providing funding for sports programs in local communities. So I think it's been a really consistent thread through the company's journey where, sports is kind of at the core, but really it's getting involved in communities and helping and serving the communities where our stores are.
So, would you put that decision not to carry guns in the store kind of was it tied to the purpose of the company in some way?
Yeah, in a way it was completely consistent because even though you might look at a piece of paper and on one side it says, providing equipment to the Little League program in a small town, and the other side of the paper would be taking assault rifles out of the store and say, like, why are those two connected? But they really are, because what we believe in is making our communities like safe spaces. So if there's an opportunity to kind of be involved in the community and keep young people safe and make these communities just in general more welcoming and safe, that's what we're about. So to us, even though it might sound like we made a left turn, in truth, it was very, very consistent with our morals and our values in terms of kids and communities.
Excellent, excellent. So Dix has recently set a target to reduce its greenhouse gas emissions by 30% by 2030. Can you report on any big wins or challenges that Dix has encountered as it starts on this journey?
Most of the opportunity for Dick's is in our stores, right? So we have a corporate headquarters in Pittsburgh. We have 5 distribution centers around the country, but we have about 850 stores in every corner of the country. So the real sustainability opportunity, the real action happens in those stores. So if you think of every store that we have, they're 50,000 square feet, or bigger in some cases. There's a lot happening in each of these stores that uses a lot of energy and emissions, right? So there really are three primary areas at the stores that we're looking at. One is LED lighting, the other is heating and cooling systems, and the third would be our roofs. But interestingly enough, the roof option is much harder for us because we are a renter in a vast, vast majority of our stores. Actually, in all of our stores, we rent. We are tenants, not landlords. It's not as clear and as obvious, I guess, or even easy for us to say, hey, we're just going to put a solar roof on 50 stores. They're not our roofs, right? They belong to the landlord. So for us, the biggest opportunity tends to be in lighting and heating and cooling systems. So that's really the biggest opportunity that we have. But of course, we're looking at any number of tools in our toolkit to make sure that we reach our goal. But right now, that's where our primary focus is at the store level.
Mm. So let me ask you a follow-up question there. So are there any particular challenges around decarbonization, particularly around supply chains or what we call, scope three beyond your own operations that are a result of so many Dick's Sporting Goods facilities being located in Appalachia and Middle America?
No, I don't think there's any barriers to scope three for us based on location, right? I think, because when you think of a Dick's Sporting Goods store, we basically have a two-pronged strategy as it relates to brands. So we have our own private brands that we call vertical brands. So those are, DSG, Kalia, Verst, and many other brands we own those brands and they are part of our family. But a much larger percentage of our brands are the national brand partners we have, Nike, North Face, Patagonia, Wilson, Rawlings, Adidas, Under Armour, and so forth. Our scope three work will involve our national strategic partners. And the good news there is that many of these companies, if you think about a Patagonia or Nike and Adidas, they're very, very engaged and pretty far along in their sustainability efforts. So kind of working with them, and because they're obviously a big, supply chain partner of ours, I think the opportunity for us is going to be working with our brand partners to really do everything we can collectively. For us, it would be scope three. For them, it would be scope 1 and 2 to bring the emissions down.
That's very good to hear. So now in 2020, Dick's Sporting Goods achieved 100% female to male median pay ratio, clearly a major milestone in terms of inclusion. What did it take to achieve this goal? And can you offer any insights for other companies that have similar ambitions?
It wasn't a heavy lift, I would say. The good news is that we had been kind of marching along that path for quite some time. And I think, and I don't know exactly how many years because I've only been with the company a year and a half, but the work around gender pay equity was happening well before there was a sustainability report. Our first report was in 2018 or 2019, I'm sorry. So, fortunately for us, when we started to dig into the data to actually understand what our goals and opportunities were, we found out that we were kind of already there, right? So, I think the good news for us is that we start from a very, very good place, and now it's up to us and our leadership team and our folks that are, our fabulous team that works in our HR department to ensure that we kind of make sure we keep it where it is today. But it's been a priority for quite some time, and it will continue to be a priority. And if you look at some of our marketing in 2021, I'm not sure if you've seen some of the television campaigns, but we focused two of our campaigns on the female leadership at the company. So it's a really important area for us, both from a teammate perspective, from what we call athletes, or what we call our consumers are called athletes. Focusing on the female athlete, making sure that we have kind of equity inside of our company. They're both massively important to Dick's Sporting Goods.
Any advice for someone else, other companies that kind of want to achieve? Do they, one or two tips that you have for them?
I'm not sure if it's not really, I'm not sure I'm the best person to give advice for somebody else's company. I think companies do what they think is best and is right for them. I guess I would just say that it's not that hard to do the work. And I think it's just a matter of just declaring a goal. And once you're public with a goal, you're accountable. And if you're accountable, our experience, my experience at any company that I've worked in, my experience at Dick's Sporting Goods is if you're publicly accountable, you're going to get it done. Luckily, in our case, we were kind of privately accountable and got it done, and then kind of went public kind of thereafter.
Yeah, and I guess one can always come back to the idea of the core purpose of the firm. If you're purpose driven, then I'm sure something like this is not that hard to achieve in reality. Right?
That's right. I think you hit on something. I think, we are at our core a family business, right? So like I said before, Ed's dad started the company, and Ed's still the executive chairman of the company. Even though we are a public company, in many cases it still feels like a family business. And I think when you have that kind of DNA and that vibe at the organization, and I'm telling you, you feel it when you walk around the halls, you feel it when you make decisions around staffing, you feel it when you are just kind of thinking about the future and taking care of communities and taking care of each other. I think when you're part of a family business, I think the values that come with that are pretty apparent, and I think we feel it, and it's a great feeling.
Sure. And I also wanted to mention for our listeners that your CEO is female. Isn't that right?
That is true. So Lauren Hobart and I actually worked together many, many years ago. We were both at PepsiCo from 2009. I think she left to go to Dick's around 2011. I stayed for 3 more years. So we've been friends and colleagues for many years. And frankly, one of the kind of appealing things about coming to work inside the company and to work with the company was rejoining Lauren. But yeah, she's been the CEO since February of 2021. And she and Ed formed a fabulous partnership. He's the executive chairman, she's the CEO. They've been working together really for 10 years to guide the company. And they're both very, very focused on the culture, and I would say on the care of our teammates. Again, we have 850 stores. There's 35,000 employees that work out in the field. And if you follow Lauren on LinkedIn, you'll see she's out visiting stores every week somewhere. And she's learning from the teammates what's working, what's not working. We're asking questions. How are you feeling? Inquiring about mental health. How are your families? So, she's made it a core part of the fabric of her leadership to get out into the field and spend time with our teammates that work in the stores, so she could really get to know them and understand kind of what their happiness is and where their pain points are, and how do we address those.
Leadership by example. I love it. Absolutely love it. Turning now our attention to something that's in the news a lot, ESG, or as you know, environmental, social, and governance metrics are becoming mainstream topics for financiers, regulators, and boards, with an ever growing number of frameworks and initiatives to measure any company's kind of ESG impacts and progress. Just curious, what are some of the most relevant metrics for a sporting goods companies like Dick's, and where are you focusing your efforts in this area?
Our purpose playbook kind of lays out, which is what we call our sustainability report, is our purpose playbook. It lays out 4 pillars, and they cover the important areas of ESG that you mentioned, but we kind of define it slightly differently, right? So we have a pillar that's around our Sports Matter and youth sports initiative. And we've established goals around getting 1 million kids to play sports by 2024. So we look at that pillar, and that's really all about the core fabric of our company, which is getting young people out to play sports. We have a second pillar is around product sustainability. So whether it's again our products or our partners' products, We are, looking very hard at how do we have, sustainable fabrics? What are our chemical policies and so forth? So we have a product pillar. We have a DE&I pillar, right, which is about kind of, we call it leveling the playing field. And we talked a little bit about pay equity and things of that nature and some of the other goals that we've publicly stated. So that's really around our workforce. And the fourth pillar is climate, right? So I think we have the E and the S and the G all covered. We just kind of name it slightly differently. And that's where our scope one, scope two, eventually scope three, and waste diversion, water usage, things of that nature, anything that impacts our environmental footprint. So again, four pillars for Dick's Sporting Goods. It's not exactly E, S, and G, but I think it's pretty close.
Fantastic conversation, but we are coming to a close of our time together. Peter, what call to action would you make to our listeners?
I mean, it sounds very cliche, but I actually think it's true that everybody kind of can play a role. I mean, we talked about a lot of things today, but if you look at climate as one, certainly whether it's reducing plastic use. If you go see what New York has done, you can't get a plastic bag anymore if you go into a supermarket, right? So I think we've all seen that the world can live without plastic bags, and that's why one of our goals is to eliminate plastic by 2025. But I think in our own lives, it's actually not that hard. People in New York have learned they take a bag with them. They go shopping. It seems to work perfectly well. So I think there are some big changes and some small changes. Whether it's have a hybrid car, right? Again, these are choices that people can make. They're personal choices in their lives. There's certainly a lot of choices that any one individual can make that can certainly have a climate impact. I think when it comes to diversity, which we talked about a little bit, most companies that we work with now, and it's not a kind of nice to do. It's a business imperative, and not just diversity for diversity's sake, but honestly, it's a business imperative because of the makeup of our country, right? I mean, the country is only going to be more diverse over the course of time. All the census data shows that. So I think any company that's thinking about diversity purely as a kind of an HR, transition matter is not really seeing the big picture. The big picture is that the country is changing, and companies need to kind of keep up with that dynamic, whether it's their marketing, their HR practices, their supply chain, their store employees, whatever that might be. It's really a cultural shift that's happening, and I think many companies are really doing a great job of it. But I think companies that really kind of take that very, very seriously will really be well positioned for the future.
Excellent pointers. Peter Land, thank you so much for spending some of your precious time with us today.
Oh, it was really my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
And this is your host, CB Bhattacharya, saying goodbye, and we look forward to seeing you next time for another edition of Sustaining Sustainability.